Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me now. My name is Alexandra Zsigmond. I'm beaming in from Vermont, but I'm based in New York. So I wanted to speak today a bit about how I've done research as an art director for the artists I work with for the New York Times. And let me just start my screen here. So thank you so much, Brief Festival, for having me. I wish I could actually be in Madrid, but I guess this is part of the topic for today about how digital life has changed our lives, especially during the pandemic. Um, Pre-pandemic, from 2010 to 2017, I was an art director for the New York Times opinion section. And one of the main things I was doing there was doing the design and art direction for the Sunday Review section, which you can see here. And a lot of that work involved working really closely with artists all over the world to create these covers and a really immersive illustrated interior section as well. And for me, the most wonderful part about this was the collaboration with artists worldwide and working closely with them to create these designs. For example, this piece by Jose Quintanar then became this exploration of how to use the printed paper in a more interactive way. So in the beginning of my career at the Times, more 2010 to 2017, I was really focused on the printed page. And over time, that's really shifted. And now I'm working much more on the digital side of things. And we'll be talking about that a bit today. But my engagement with Instagram actually started in the very beginning with this post that you just saw. So this was maybe my fourth post on Instagram. And I really started my Instagram account initially as a way to really promote artists that I was finding in all different sorts of ways. But I kind of viewed myself as an ambassador or sort of diplomat, somebody that could find artists from around the world, give them a platform on the pages of the New York Times, and then help other curators and art directors find these artists. My own relationship with social media has been a little bit difficult, and I find it very anxiety provoking, partially also because I'm an artist as well. And so I've used my Instagram account both as an art director to promote other artists, but also to promote my own work. And I've found that combining those two things has sort of given me anxiety, and oftentimes I don't quite know how to treat my identity on social media, actually. But kind of what I wanted to talk about today was the process of researching artists, because that process for me has changed a lot with the pandemic and just with the development of digital culture. In the beginning, this was like, I think my 7th Instagram post. I was traveling a lot, and this is a Blex Bolex piece that I saw at this amazing exhibition in this tiny little town in Italy, Macerata. This was a zine festival in Italy that I went to scout artists and to meet people. And, my life as a curator has really been about meeting people in person, looking at zines and physical objects, and really engaging with with people and things. And this is one thing that I've really missed during the pandemic. And I've met so many artists in person. This was a piece I saw at that festival in Macerata by this artist, Elisa Tolentino. And then she ended up on the pages of the Times. So many of my commissions for the Sunday Review were through research that I did from traveling to places and really engaging with the people there. Another example of that was when I was living in Madrid in 2018. I came to teach at EAD for a semester and was doing tons of research on artists there, met a lot of amazing people. Ana Galvan, for example, I found her book and then met a lot of artists through her, through Carla Berrocal and Miriam Persand, who were kind of introducing me to a lot of the history of Madrid. I got really interested in the signage, and then I would take a lot of runs in El Retiro Park and photographed the peacocks there. So I was really doing a lot of both experiential research and then also research on artists. Um, and I remember going to this one exhibition in 2018 in Madrid for this Teen Wolf anthology. And what's been really interesting now, I'm at the Times kind of curating for a digital column, and a lot of the artists that I met and kind of saw their work for the first time at this show in Madrid, I've now been curating into the pages of the Times. This is Miriam Persand for a piece on burrito delivery. And then Rapapan, who I also found at that show or saw their work for the first time for this animated piece for the same column. So, you know, so much of my enjoyment as a curator has come from really doing this in-person research and exploring the world, meeting people. And I think that that's really informed my work as a curator in deep ways. And so that's been sort of affected maybe negatively during the pandemic. It's been interesting now from working on the Sunday Review. I then left the New York Times for around 2 years, and now I'm back there curating again, but I'm only curating digitally. And so this piece by Rapapan, for example, is one of the more recent pieces that I commissioned. And so it's been interesting now from being so print oriented to now being almost solely digitally oriented. It's changed the artists that I hire. And it's also changed kind of the stories that I'm thinking about that can be told through illustration online. Um, so, you know, I'm doing a lot of new research on artists, and all of this research now, instead of going to festivals and traveling, I'm doing all of my research online now, obviously. I mean, I was doing a lot online before, but now it's completely gone online. And I've found myself becoming really interested in curating new types of artists into the Times, video game artists, new media artists, people who are working specifically with the digital space, because I'm now working only on a digital column. So for example, this was an article that I had to commission art for. It was on kind of transportation gridlock or the hellscape that would emerge in New York City during the pandemic. And so I had to find an artist that could convey this hellscape on the streets. So this was the result, hiring this team of video game designers. I actually found them through extensive online research. Now that I can't go to exhibitions in person during the pandemic, I've been kind of attending exhibitions online, and I've just been doing a lot of research on past exhibitions. And so I found those artists' work through this exhibition at the V&A Museum in London. They had curated a whole exhibition on video games. And through that exhibition, I found this team's work. They did a video game called Minute with this old video game style, which I love. So through that research, found these new artists, and that led to this commission. So, you know, it's a new way of finding artists, getting much more in depth about my online research. Another thing that I do have to say I like about doing research on Instagram is that I find that more and more artists nowadays are posting a lot of their experiments on Instagram, not even finished pieces, but also personal experiments, ways that they're experimenting with technology. So for example, I found this artist, Keel, through Instagram by searching for the hashtag processing and coding. I've been really interested in trying to find artists that use code in interesting ways in their artwork, and have been looking to bring more code-based artwork into the Times. So I found this artist through Instagram, and now, after just, I think, a month or so, we've collaborated on a lot of artworks for the Times. Here's an example of one of those. He's illustrated a lot of pieces for TikTok. They've all been animated. And another thing about this column that I'm art directing now is that these deadlines are typically between like 8 hours and 3 hours. So the artist sometimes has to create a piece within a 3-hour time period. So they're very immediate, but I find that oftentimes it forces the artist to work really intuitively. And so it's been interesting to see how all of these artists approach these topics through animation and through movement. You know, and a lot of times what I also use Instagram for is, for example, with this piece, I used it to see the artist's other work and try to brainstorm ways that they could approach the topic. So I often will use it to just save references and then kind of send those back to the artist to help them brainstorm how to approach a piece conceptually. Another example of finding an artist on Instagram was Scott Gelber. I follow him and I just pay attention to the kind of work he's creating. He's another new media artist. So for example, I had seen him post this piece on, you know, he does a lot of work on digital life and how we interact with our phones. And so when I recently had a piece to commission on doom scrolling, which is kind of a new word that has been created in 2020. So I thought, as soon as I got this article on doom scrolling, I thought about that piece, this piece right here. So we worked closely together, collaboratively, to try to reimagine this piece for the article. And this is what he came up with. So I love how immediate this is and how much it speaks to, I think, what it's been like being online during this pandemic, this whole year. And also what I think is really powerful here is it just brings you right into the feeling of doom scrolling. So this piece kind of got a lot of play online, and I just love how much it captures that emotion. And then finally, you know, what's been interesting now about working primarily digitally and commissioning animation and digital work rather than commissioning printed work is just thinking a lot about how the digital world has changed, how we interact creatively. I mean, for me, it's changed how I do research, what kinds of artists I work with, and how I think about storytelling in the editorial space. I think now I'm really interested in how animated illustrations can tell a lot of the concept and the story of an article. In this case, this was about the black hole of the internet and how we get sucked into the lies and misinformation of the internet. And I loved how the artist Brenna Murphy was able to tell this story through the process of us falling into a computer. So I will stop there. Actually, this went faster than I thought it would, but maybe we could have questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I wondered if there were any questions. I'm not sure if Gloria, you'd want to.
Hi, hello, Alexandra. How are
Hi,
you?
hi,
How
good,
are
thank
you?
you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Yes, I have two questions actually.
Oh, great.
So, besides Instagram, are there other platforms where you search for artists, even if they're smaller, or any other place useful to you, to your work?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I wanted to talk about Instagram today just because it's become a much more important part of my research recently during the pandemic, but I also have always looked at It's Nice That, the online website that's based in London. And then I look at Behance too. I look at individual websites, portfolio websites. But one thing that I'm finding more and more is that people tend to update, of course, their Instagram account so much more, and that's where they're posting their experimental and personal work. So more and more I'm finding artist portfolio sites a little less helpful, actually. Um, but yeah, I look everywhere online, and I think, you know, what I was talking about in the beginning of my talk is loving looking at zines and going to zine fairs. And now I guess I'm just looking at all of those things online, exhibitions online, talks online. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And we have two more questions. So from Oscar Solano, how do you think the rush of the timeline affects the creative process of the artist?
Well, I can't answer that completely, but so on the positive side, I do think that it forces you to think intuitively. And um, as a result, oftentimes I find like even work that's done by an artist within 3 hours, sometimes it's been some of the strongest work. I think that, you know, my process is I don't leave artists alone. In that process, I give them ideas. And so it is really a collaboration. So they're not alone in a 3 hour period to just come up with something. Um, but yeah, I do find that it makes you think intuitively. It makes you work very quickly. But it has been frustrating for me because when I was working on the Sunday Review, for example, that was a longer deadline. Still, it wasn't very long. It was around 4 days. But now the fact that it's just anywhere between 3 hours to 8 hours is, I mean, it certainly stresses me out. I definitely have had a spike of anxiety because of it. Um, and it means that I'm working with artists, that I'm working with the same artists a little more often. I think that when I have longer deadlines, I do actually more research. And then in this case, because I have to be so immediate, I kind of stick to a certain group of artists. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have more questions. So, do, do you have any tips for an artist to get noticed or found by someone like you?
Um, yeah, well, so for one, I think posting your personal work on Instagram is really helpful. And I really like seeing, you know, I oftentimes have been really inspired by people's artwork. I think a lot of illustrators have the work they do commercially, but then they also have strands of their work that they're just doing for themselves. And I would just encourage everyone to really post that work too, whether on your website or on Instagram, because um, oftentimes I feel like some of the best editorial artwork comes out of that personal work. Because in the end, it means that you're most inspired about it because it's your own vision. Um, so yeah, I would recommend that. And for me as a conceptual editorial art director, I'm looking for concept. So I want to see examples in your portfolio of how you approach an article conceptually. So I guess like if you're an emerging illustrator and you don't yet have examples of editorial in your work, I would suggest just trying your hand at it, like picking articles and then illustrating them and putting that in your portfolio. Because yeah, I'm mostly looking for um, uniqueness of style and concept and I guess refinement of technique as well.
Super
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay.
So, more questions.
Mhm.
Have you
Great.
found an alternative to physical contact in fairs and festivals? Because online portfolios are limited. Do you interviews? This one was from Bea Canut.
Oh, what was the last part of that?
Uh, have I can repeat if you
Oh
want
yeah,
the
sure.
entire question. Have you found an alternative to physical contact in fairs and festivals? Because online portfolios are limited. Do you interview?
Okay. Um, I have done a bunch of Zoom portfolio reviews. During this whole year, I've done it quite a lot, and you know, it's a fine replacement. Uh, but part of why I wanted to show those old photos of being in Madrid and being in Italy is that I just miss that human contact. But yeah, I do think that Zoom has been fine, and I have been doing critiques and interviews on Zoom. Um, but I guess I can't really recommend anything specifically. All the ones I've done are through schools. Um, and I don't really know that many resources yet for that are more open for illustrators to meet with art directors. But that's a good point. That should exist. Yeah.
Okay. Another one from Roberta Esposito. What kind of studies have you done? When did you understand that the research was actually central in your job?
Mm. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. So I started when I was in university, I was actually studying philosophy and art history. So I started out not really as an artist and designer, but more as a theorist and a writer. So even since since I was in university, research has always been really important for me. Um, so um, and then right after I graduated from university, I started working in a museum, and research was really important there too. So I guess because I come from a more like theoretical writing based background, it's always been important. Um, and I think I was just really happy to find this job at the Times that can combine design and research, just because I enjoy research so much. Also, my dad is a scientist and an archivist. And so I think being able to keep archives of artists online and really have this group of artists that I follow has been natural to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
super interesting. Everyone wants to ask a question. So
Good.
we have another one. What does the breadcrumb trail look like when it comes to finding an artist based on the topic you are covering? What's
Mm.
the first thing you do?
That is a good question. So I have an archive of artists that I keep online through two different bookmarking systems. I use Diigo, Diigo, and then I also use a system called Dropmark. And I keep this very well archived large compilation of sites in there. And they're all tagged by keywords. So I'll have a keyword like psychology or technology. And then say if I have a piece on iPhones, I'll search the technology tag and it will remind me of all of those portfolios that I saved um, that were about that topic. So I use these archives, and that's very much, whenever I'm researching, I'll save something to the archive. Um, and I guess that's the main thing because it's very hard to find artists based on topic. I mean, there's probably a way to do it in Instagram better than I do, but I have found artists a little bit more specifically when I've looked for coding or um, different techniques like processing, which is a coding language. So I can find artists that way, but for larger topics like an article on psychology, it's a little harder. And that's when I turn to my archive. Um, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think we have time for another one.
Yeah.
And Javier Leon is asking, do you see Instagram as as an opportunity or a risk for artists?
That is also a great question. I think, one thing that I've spoken about with friends is that would make it a risk is that people sometimes, when they see your work on Instagram, feel like they've already owned it or that they've already engaged with it. So then when it comes time, maybe as an artist to sell your work, um, maybe there's a way in which it doesn't feel novel anymore because people already feel like they've consumed it through social media. But then at the same time, nowadays it's oftentimes the only way people will see it at all, maybe, especially during the pandemic. So I don't know. I too, I have like a lot of anxious feelings around social media and Instagram. I find the process of posting to Instagram extremely anxiety provoking. But in general, I think maybe, I just have to get over it. I think in the end, it really can help you get seen by different art directors. And yeah, it's a good research tool and a good way to be found. by art directors.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah. Regarding this question, we had another one. And is how do you face the anxiety that social media has a tendency to generate?
Yeah, well, I haven't found a good
Complicated.
answer with that. Yeah, I haven't found an answer for that. You know, I go on and off being very active on Instagram. I think in general, I could be way more active on it. And the thing that keeps me off of it is this anxiety. Um, and oftentimes that's anxiety that comes from posting my own work and feeling vulnerable about what people will think about it. Especially as a curator who's worked with so many artists, then I feel vulnerable posting my own work. Um, I guess I use writing and running and exercise just as the antidote to that. Um, but yeah, I definitely need more techniques for that. So hopefully somebody else during this conference will help us with that.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Alexandra.
Thank you so
Unfortunately,
much.
we're out of time, but we had a fantastic Q&A. Thank you so much for answering all the questions, and I hope to see you very soon, and hopefully in Madrid.
Me too. I hope so. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. And anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And I wish I could be there maybe next year.
Yeah.